Winning a championship in the NBA is never an easy task. Only one team can walk away each season with the title. 30 teams all start from the same place on opening night of the season, and only one can be crowned the champion. To win an NBA championship requires the perfect roster construction, talent, mentality, and of course, even some luck thrown into that. It's a combination of factors and a recipe that franchises are constantly thinking of how to build to ensure success. Everything has to fall in place for a franchise to win a title. And if you thought it was easy, just ask these 10 teams who have never won a championship in their franchise's history, half of them having never gone to the NBA Finals, let alone winning the whole thing. And 19 franchises currently in the NBA have never won more than one single championship in their history. That's right, just 11 teams have won multiple titles in the league in its 77 years of existence. Safe to say, winning a championship is by no means a cakewalk, and any team who walks away with a ring should be celebrated for that accomplishment and outlasting the other 29 teams in the association. But while winning a title or even just getting to the finals is no easy feat, there have been some easier paths on the road to the finals than others, where a combination of attrition, staying healthy, and having your opponents see the opposite falling right into your lap. And for the Boston Celtics, who are on their way to the finals for the second time in 3 years, their path of getting there has not only arguably been the easiest path to do so, it has been the easiest road to the finals we have ever seen in NBA history, and I'm here to explain why. Of course, as always, if you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, then be sure to subscribe, as it does help the channel grow, and in return, I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, when talking about something such as the Celtics having the easiest run to the finals in history, the discourse on this topic is, of course, subjective, prone to recency bias, and not something that can easily be quantifiable to show why one can claim for it to be the easiest playoff run we have ever seen. And while that is true, we're going to try and look at this as objectively as possible using data to back up this claim. And while I'm sure some will say this is just a hater talking who can't appreciate the team with the best record in the NBA this season going to the finals, I do want to be clear that I thought the Celtics were and would have gone to the finals regardless of the circumstances to their opponent, which we'll talk about. And yes, it is absolutely not the Celtics' fault that they play in one of the weakest conferences, and it's certainly not their fault that every one of their playoff opponents saw injuries to their best players. At the end of the day, they took care of business and didn't falter on their way to becoming the Eastern Conference champions yet again. So rather than looking at this as hating, it's more a response to all the NBA discourse going around right now that this has been the weakest finals run we have ever seen. I wanted to take an objective look to see if in fact that was true. And to start in assessing this, we of course have to take a look at history, because while this run from the Celtics has been a walk in the park for them, there have been a fair share of teams who did a slow jog on their way to the finals. Take the 2013 Miami Heat, for example, a team that finished with 66 wins on their way to their second title, who faced a Milwaukee Bucks team that had just won 38 games on the season and devoid of any star players. They would face the Chicago Bulls in the second round, who were dealing with significant injuries in that playoff series as well, including Rose being out the whole season from an ACL injury, and then Luol Deng missing the whole series from a spinal tap. The Bulls would end up having Nate Robinson and Marco Bellinelli start for them in that series. Then, of course, the Heat would face off against the Pacers in the conference finals, a team that was good and young, but were too inexperienced and lacked the requisite depth and star-level talent to really take out a powerhouse like the Miami Heat in their Big Three. Of course, going further back, the Boston Celtics had their own fair share of easy runs in getting to the finals in a weak Eastern Conference, while they were loaded with future Hall of Famers. The 1986 Celtics come to mind, who played a 30-win Bulls team in the first round, a series most people remember for young MJ's heroics, where he set a playoff record of 63 points in a game. While their second and third round opponents, being the Atlanta Hawks and the Milwaukee Bucks, they were much more formidable, the Celtics were just leaps and bounds ahead of them in terms of the competition and presented the most difficult matchups for Atlanta and Milwaukee. While Boston also lucked out in going up against what likely would have been their toughest opponent in the Philadelphia 76ers that year. But there are two teams, and I should really say two instances because it was the same team in both scenarios, but two finals runs that were by far and away the easiest in NBA history that should be compared to this recent Celtics run. And that's the 1984 Lakers and the 87 Lakers. The reason for these being the easiest is, one, you have to look at who they matched up against in each round, how good their opponent was. Two, any poor luck their opponent went through in their playoff run, i.e. suffering any major injuries. And then three, whether the Lakers lucked out in avoiding an opponent that would have presented a tougher matchup for them. For the 84 Lakers, not only did they see teams who weren't good in the regular season, playing against the Kings in the first round, who had only won 38 games, They avoided the Sonics in the second round, who were actually one of the toughest matchups for them in the regular season, and instead playing against an inexperienced Dallas Mavericks team who had just won 43 games on the year. And in the conference finals, they faced off against a Phoenix Suns team who were just 500 on the season and upset the second-seeded Utah Jazz, yet another team that presented problems for the Showtime Lakers. The Lakers were really good that season and would have likely gone to the finals anyway, but they avoided two tough matchups in the second round and conference finals that would make their path all the more easier. For the 1987 Lakers, though, it was an even bigger joke, because not only was this team so dominant in winning 65 games and finishing with the best record in the league, but they would face just one team in the playoffs that was above 500 in the regular season, that being the Golden State Warriors in the second round, a Warriors team that was just 2 games above 500, in fact. Instead of facing off against two of their hardest opponents in the West, in the Dallas Mavericks and the Portland Trail Blazers that year, both teams would end up getting knocked out of the first round due to injuries sustained from each of their team in their respective series. And so instead, the Lakers would face off against the worst team, by record anyway, to ever reach the conference finals in the Seattle Supersonics, who had just won 39 games in the regular season. The Lakers, in that run to the finals, would lose just one game in those 3 series, sweeping the first round and the conference finals. A walk in the park for the Showtime Lakers. So how does this compare to the current Boston Celtics and their finals run? In fact, you could argue, at least in terms of their opponents, they were much tougher than what these Lakers teams of the 80s saw, or even the Miami Heat in 2013. After all, the Celtics didn't face a single opponent that finished below 500, like so many of these teams saw before them. The first round matchup against the Miami Heat, a team that won 46 games on the year and is never an easy out in the postseason. They played a Cavs team that won 48 games with young talent and a superstar in Donovan Mitchell, something these previous teams never faced in star-level talent in their playoff series. And then a Pacers team, while inexperienced, they've been on the up and up with a budding young star in Tyrese Halliburton and their star acquisition at the deadline in Pascal Siakam. So on the surface, what's the problem here? How is this run to the finals by the Celtics deemed to be easy at all, or any easier than what some of these teams in the past have seen? Well, what we have never seen in the past, literally never in NBA history, is a team going through all 3 rounds on their way to the finals in which the opposing team was without their best player at least for more than one game in that series. The Miami Heat, and what has made them such a nightmare to play against in the playoffs in the past, is seeing playoff Jimmy go to work. But without Jimmy Butler being available in that series, Miami didn't stand a chance. For the second round against the Cavs, again, hands down, the Celtics are still the better team, even when the Cavs are healthy. But Boston was fortunate to not see Jarrett Allen when the Celtics were without Porzingis. And then the Cavs were also without their best player and a guy who has taken over for them in the postseason in Donovan Mitchell, and missing those 2 critical games in 4 and 5. And then the Pacers, well, yes, they were no matchup for the Celtics, and yes, the Pacers would lose their best player in Tyrese Halliburton for games 3 and 4. What was a bigger difference maker for me, and why this should be considered a bigger factor in helping Boston get to the finals, is actually not seeing, in my view, their 3 hardest matchups when healthy at all in any round of the playoffs. Those being the New York Knicks, Milwaukee Bucks, and the Philadelphia 76ers. Would I still take Boston in a 7-game series against any of these teams when healthy? Yes, but Boston playing any of those teams would have been a much tougher out than matchups that they saw in this playoff run. Unlike what we have seen in the past from these easiest roads to the finals, is not only multiple injuries to their opponent's best player, but multiple injuries to those they didn't see in the playoffs where they likely otherwise would have had those teams been healthy. The Bucks being without Giannis, and even Damian Lillard, who missed 2 games in that series and clearly wasn't himself in the final game of that one against the Pacers. The Knicks, who were decimated with injuries both from the regular season and going into the playoffs to their key players, which prevented them from winning the series against the Indiana Pacers. Really, you could say the Pacers had the easiest path to the conference finals before they finally hit the injury bug. And then the Philadelphia 76ers, while I know most won't agree with this, the Sixers, in my view, again, when fully healthy, would have presented the biggest challenge for Boston. A healthy Embiid, which the Celtics wouldn't have an answer for, Tyrese Maxey playing out of his mind, their floor spacing and pace which can match that of the Celtics, the fact that they're actually one of the best teams in the league in defending the perimeter to be able to limit the Celtics' high 3-point volume, but because of the injury to Joel Embiid in the regular season, which caused the Sixers to fall in the standings, and when Embiid did come back, he clearly was not 100%. We never truly got to see that matchup come to play. Again, I still would have taken Boston in a 7-game series over a healthy Sixers team, but it would have been their toughest matchup. And so when you factor in the injuries to their opponent in every round, injuries not just to any player, but their best player, but then also the injuries to the teams they didn't see, which enabled them to see an easier conference finals matchup in the Indiana Pacers. While some of these teams of the past may have gone against teams with records below 500, never have we seen a scenario in which every one of their opponents suffered multiple injuries to their players, including their best player on the roster, which makes this the easiest road to the finals we have seen from any team in NBA history. Let me know what you guys think though, and if you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next one.